When you're born in Canada, as soon as you're born, they put the Gordon Lightfoot chip right into your head, and right in the delivery room, they all sing "Happy Birthday to you."
Remember the nerdy accountant in Ghostbusters? The guy who shrank his kids? Dark Helmet from Spaceballs? Rick Moranis was everywhere in the 80s and 90s, bringing his unique brand of everyman comedy to one hit after another. Then, at the height of his career, he vanished from Hollywood. No scandal, no public meltdown. He just stepped away, and for nearly 3 decades, his absence became one of show business's most puzzling mysteries. So let's explore what really happened to Rick Moranis. Early years and the road to SCTV. Frederick Allen Moranis was born on April 18, 1953, in Toronto, Ontario. He grew up in a Jewish family and attended Sir Sanford Fleming Secondary School, where he first got bit by the broadcasting bug. While still in high school, he worked part-time as a radio engineer, tinkering with equipment and getting a feel for how the medium worked. It didn't take long before Rick figured out he was funnier than most of the DJs he was engineering for. He started slipping them one-liners and comedy bits. The DJs liked his material, and before long, Rick was on the air himself. He worked at 3 different Toronto radio stations under the name Rick Allen, building a following with his quick wit and knack for character voices. But radio, for all its appeal, had limitations. Rick wanted to be seen, not just heard. He started doing stand-up comedy at local clubs, testing material, and learning how to work a room. That led to a spot on the CBC sketch comedy show 90 Minutes Live in the mid-1970s, where he got his first taste of television. Interestingly enough, Rick went to elementary school with Geddy Lee, the bassist and vocalist for Rush. Years later, when Rush reached superstar status, Rick would occasionally joke about knowing Geddy back when they were just kids in Toronto. Small world. In 1980, Rick got the call that would change his career. His friend and comedy writer Dave Thomas was working on Second City Television, SCTV for short, and several cast members were leaving. The show needed fresh talent, and Dave thought Rick would be perfect. Rick joined the 3rd season, becoming the only regular cast member who hadn't come from the Second City stage troupe. He was, in a sense, the odd man out, but he fit right in. The Mackenzie brothers and SCTV success. SCTV was unlike anything else on television. It was a sketch comedy show set at a fictional TV station, featuring an ensemble cast that created some of the most memorable characters and parodies of the era. When NBC picked up the show for late-night broadcasts and wanted 90-minute episodes, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation demanded identifiable Canadian content for their portion. Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis responded to this requirement in the most sarcastic way possible. They created Bob and Doug Mackenzie, a pair of dim-witted Canadian brothers who sat around in toques, drinking beer, discussing hockey, and saying a lot. It was a deliberate parody of what Americans thought Canadians were like, and it was supposed to be a throwaway bit, except nobody told the audience it was throwaway. Bob and Doug became wildly popular, both in Canada and the United States. NBC specifically requested the Mackenzie brothers appear in every episode. Rick and Dave were actually kind of annoyed by this. They found the characters stupid and stultifying, but they couldn't argue with success. In 1981, they recorded a comedy album as Bob and Doug called The Great White North. It sold over 1 million copies and won a Juno Award, the Canadian equivalent of a Grammy. Rick and Dave suddenly had a phenomenon on their hands, whether they liked it or not.
Because we were working 18 hours a day. I was spending more time with Dave Thomas than Pam was.
The attention wasn't universally appreciated within SCTV. Some cast members, particularly John Candy and Joe Flaherty, accused Dave Thomas of abusing his role as head writer by cramming Mackenzie bits into every script. There were tensions, but Rick and Dave kept at it because, despite their personal feelings about the characters, they recognized the opportunity. SCTV also gave Rick a chance to showcase his impressions. He did Woody Allen, Merv Griffin, David Brinkley, George Carlin, Michael McDonald, a whole gallery of celebrities, some famous, some obscure. His Woody Allen was particularly spot on, capturing not just the voice, but the neurotic mannerisms. Rick proved he had range, even if audiences mainly wanted more Bob and Doug. In 1982, both Rick and Dave left SCTV. The show would continue without them, but they had movie opportunities waiting. After watching their fellow cast members, John Candy, Joe Flaherty, and Eugene Levy, land their own Hollywood feature, Going Berserk, Rick and Dave pitched a Bob and Doug movie to MGM. Strange Brew and the Move to Hollywood. Strange Brew came out in 1983. Rick and Dave co-wrote, co-directed, and starred in it. The plot was loosely based on Hamlet, of all things, with the Mackenzie brothers stumbling into a sinister conspiracy at a brewery while trying to scam free beer. The humor was broad, the premise was absurd, and it somehow worked. Made for about $5 million, the movie easily recouped its budget at the box office and became a cult favorite. A soundtrack album followed, though it didn't do nearly as well as The Great White North. By 1984, Rick and Dave had done Pizza Hut commercials as the Mackenzies and were ready to move on to solo careers. They'd milked Bob and Doug for everything they were worth. Rick's first major Hollywood role came in 1984 with Streets of Fire, where he played a dramatic part, a departure from comedy. It wasn't a hit, but it showed he could handle different kinds of material. Then came Ghostbusters, and everything changed. Playing Louis Tully, the nerdy accountant who lived in the same building as Sigourney Weaver's Dana Barrett, Rick created a character that became instantly memorable. Louis was socially awkward, talked too much, and had no idea how to handle the supernatural chaos happening around him. The role was actually based on a similar character Rick had played on SCTV. When Louis gets possessed by a demon and turns into the Keymaster, Rick's physical comedy elevated what could have been a one-note part. Ghostbusters was a massive hit, grossing over $295 million worldwide. Rick was now part of one of the biggest comedies of the decade. He reprised the role in Ghostbusters 2 in 1989, which, while not as beloved as the original, still did strong box office. Between the two Ghostbusters films, Rick's career hit its stride. In 1986, he starred in Little Shop of Horrors as Seymour Krelborn, the meek florist shop employee who discovers a man-eating plant. Director Frank Oz cast him specifically because Rick could make a pathetic character sympathetic. Rick's musical numbers showed yet another skill. He could sing and sing well. The film became another hit. 1987 brought Spaceballs, Mel Brooks's Star Wars parody. Rick played Dark Helmet, the Darth Vader knockoff who was short, incompetent, and hilariously insecure about both. Some of his best moments in the film came from improvisation. Mel Brooks encouraged the cast to play around with the material, and Rick delivered. Spaceballs gave Rick yet another iconic role, and the movie's enduring popularity meant generations of fans would discover it on home video. The peak years. 1989 was Rick Moranis' biggest year in Hollywood. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids became a surprise blockbuster, earning over $222 million worldwide. Rick played Wayne Selinsky, an inventor whose shrinking machine accidentally miniaturizes his children. It was a family-friendly comedy with impressive special effects for its time, and Rick's earnest performance as the well-meaning but accident-prone scientist anchored the whole thing. That same year, he appeared in Parenthood, Ron Howard's ensemble comedy drama about the challenges of raising children. Rick played Nathan Huffner, an overly controlling father determined to make his daughter a genius. It was a smaller role compared to his starring turns, but Parenthood was both a critical and commercial success. Rick even won an American Comedy Award for his supporting performance. In 1990, Rick starred alongside Steve Martin in My Blue Heaven, a comedy about a mobster and witness protection. While the film wasn't as successful as his previous hits, it paired him with another comedy heavyweight and showed he could hold his own in ensemble casts. Disney, thrilled with the success of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, brought Rick back for Honey, I Blew Up the Kid in 1992. This sequel saw Wayne Selinsky accidentally making his toddler grow to enormous size. It didn't match the original's box office, but performed well enough to justify another sequel. By this point, Rick was one of Disney's go-to comedy actors. In 1994, he appeared in both The Flintstones and Little Giants. As Barney Rubble in The Flintstones, Rick brought warmth and humor to Fred Flintstone's best friend. Despite mixed reviews, the film was a box office success. Little Giants, a kids' sports comedy where Rick played a reluctant football coach, was less successful but had its charms. 1996's Big Bully paired Rick with Tom Arnold in a comedy about childhood bullies reuniting as adults. The film was a box office disappointment and received harsh reviews. Rick's string of hits had finally hit a wall. What nobody outside his inner circle knew was that Rick's personal life had taken a devastating turn, and Hollywood success was about to become irrelevant.
Yeah, I grew this for a role that I didn't wind up doing. And then I was inches from the barber's chair, and my agent called and said, hold the beard, because there might be something for the beard.
Personal tragedy. In 1986, Rick had married Ann Belsky, a talented costume and makeup designer who had worked on productions like Death of a Salesman and Late Night with David Letterman. They were partners in every sense, creatively compatible, deeply in love, building a life together in New York City rather than Los Angeles. They had 2 children, Mitchell, born in 1988, and Rachel, born in 1991. Then, in the early 1990s, Ann was diagnosed with breast cancer. Rick tried to balance his career with caring for his wife and young children. He dropped out of the 1991 film City Slickers because of Ann's illness, a role that went to Daniel Stern instead. On February 4th, 1991, Ann Belsky Moranis passed away. She was 34 years old, one day shy of her 35th birthday. Rick was suddenly a widower with 2 small children. In the immediate aftermath, Rick kept working. He did the Honey, I Blew Up the Kid sequel. He appeared in The Flintstones and Little Giants. But as 1996 rolled into 1997, something became clear to him. He couldn't do this anymore. The traveling, the promotional tours, the time away from his kids, it was too much. Disney released Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves direct-to-video in 1997. Rick reprised his role as Wayne Selinsky one last time. It was his final live-action film appearance. He was 44 years old at the top of his profession, and he walked away. The Hollywood exit. Rick didn't announce a retirement, he just stopped. No press conference, no big farewell. He simply declined new roles and focused on being a single parent to Mitchell and Rachel. It was a decision almost unheard of in Hollywood. Actors at the peak of their careers don't walk away voluntarily. They age out, or they burn out, or scandals force them out. But Rick was still bankable, still beloved, and still getting offers. Studios wanted him. Producers wanted him. But his kids needed him more. The mid to late 1990s were a period when family comedies were huge business. Disney was pumping them out one after another. Rick could have easily continued the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids franchise with theatrical sequels. He could have headlined other family films. The money would have been substantial. The fame would have continued. But every movie meant months away from home, weeks of promotional tours, constant travel. For a single father with young children, it was impossible. In later interviews, Rick was straightforward about his decision. I'm a single parent, and I just found that it was too difficult to manage to raise my kids and to do the traveling involved in making movies, he told USA Today. It's a situation that's obviously difficult for a child to deal with. So, I took a little bit of a break. And the little bit of a break turned into a longer break, and then I found that I really didn't miss it. That last part is crucial. Rick didn't step away kicking and screaming, planning to return as soon as his kids were older. He discovered he genuinely didn't miss the pressure of Hollywood. The endless script readings, the studio notes, the promotional obligations, none of it appealed to him anymore. He'd also grown frustrated with the creative limitations of big-budget filmmaking. On the last couple of movies I made, big-budget Hollywood movies, I really missed being able to create my own material, he said in a 2004 interview. In the early movies I did, I was brought in to basically rewrite my stuff, whether it was Ghostbusters or Spaceballs. By the time I got to the point where I was starring in movies, and I had executives telling me what lines to say, that wasn't for me. There was also the reality that Hollywood had changed. The kind of smart, character-driven comedies Rick excelled at were giving way to broader, more effects-driven fare. The roles he was being offered didn't excite him creatively. He'd done the nerdy scientist thing multiple times. He'd done the put-upon-everyman, without the ability to shape the material the way he had early in his career. Acting became just a job, and not a particularly fulfilling one. Rick had fallen out of love with being an actor, and his priorities had shifted completely to being a father. Mitchell and Rachel needed stability, normalcy, and a parent who was actually present. Hollywood could wait, or not wait. Rick genuinely didn't care.
And I've said no to them primarily because I want to spend time with my family.
Life out of the spotlight. For nearly 3 decades, Rick Moranis lived a quiet life in New York City. He didn't become a recluse. People would occasionally spot him on the street, and he was always gracious when recognized. People are very nice when they see me, he mentioned in one interview. They ask me, how come they don't make movies like they used to? We were governed by a certain kind of taste at that time, and there were places we wouldn't go with language and bodily fluids and functions. I think that's what they're nostalgic for. He raised his kids in New York rather than Los Angeles, which was deliberate. New York offered anonymity in a way LA never could. In New York, even famous people can walk down the street without paparazzi stalking them. Rick could take his kids to school, go to the grocery store, live a normal life. Mitchell has pursued work in the entertainment industry, though he keeps a low profile. He's dabbled in acting, producing, and music, but he's maintained the same preference for privacy his father modeled. Rachel, who was born in 1991, grew up with a father who prioritized her well-being over red carpets and premiere parties. Rick didn't entirely disappear from creative work. He continued to do voiceover projects that allowed him to work from home. In 2003, he voiced Rut the Moose in Disney's Brother Bear, working alongside his old SCTV colleague Dave Thomas, who voiced Rut's brother Took. The Moose characters had a distinctly Mackenzie Brothers vibe to them, and Rick and Dave clearly enjoyed playing off each other again. He reprised the role for the direct-to-video sequel in 2006. Voiceover work was perfect for Rick's situation. He could record his lines in a New York studio, be home in time for dinner, and never have to leave his kids for weeks at a time. It kept him connected to the industry without the demands of live-action filmmaking. More surprisingly, Rick dove into music. In 2005, he released The Agoraphobic Cowboy, a comedy album of satirical country songs. It was clever, funny, and completely unexpected from someone who'd been out of the public eye for years. The album featured songs with titles like Press Pound, a satire of automated phone systems, and showcased Rick's wit and musical ability. It earned a Grammy nomination for Best Comedy Album. Rick performed Press Pound on Late Night with Conan O'Brien in 2006 to promote it, one of his rare public appearances. In 2013, he released another comedy album, My Mother's Brisket and Other Love Songs. Rick described it as containing songs that were too Jewish for mainstream Hollywood, but perfect for fans who appreciated his sensibility. When I first began writing jokes and sketches with various Jewish partners, one of us would inevitably stop at some point and announce, too Jewish for the star, the show, the network, or the audience. The songs on this album are all in that category. He also wrote occasional pieces for publications like the New York Times, showing his wit translated well to the written word. These weren't celebrity puff pieces or promotional content. They were genuine essays that displayed the same intelligence and humor that had made his performances so memorable. In 2007, Rick reunited with Dave Thomas for Bob and Doug McKenzie's 2 to 4 anniversary, a TV special celebrating 24 years of the McKenzie brothers. They shot new footage together, and it was clear the chemistry was still there, even after all those years. The special even featured former Canadian Prime Minister Paul Martin, underscoring how the McKenzie brothers had gone from a sarcastic sketch to genuine Canadian icons. When Dave later created an animated Bob and Doug series for Global TV, Rick declined to voice Bob. That role went to Dave Coulier, but he stayed on as an executive producer. He was willing to be involved, just not in ways that required extensive time commitments. Rick's life was full, just not full of movies, and he made it clear he had no regrets. I have absolutely no regrets whatsoever, he said when asked about stepping away from acting.
I enjoyed playing the role. Everybody loves a nerd, and it's fun to play them.
Recent years and potential return. In 2020, something unexpected happened. Rick appeared in a Mint Mobile commercial alongside Ryan Reynolds. It was his first on-screen appearance in years, and the internet went wild. Reynolds, who clearly idolized Rick, was visibly thrilled to be working with him. Honestly, when he said yes, I wept, Reynolds tweeted. The 40-second commercial was simple, funny, and directly addressed Rick's long absence. It's hard to believe that Mint Mobile has gone so long without an unlimited plan, Reynolds said. So to introduce it, we brought in an actor we've all gone too long without. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with fans expressing joy at seeing Rick back in any capacity. Then came bigger news. In 2020, it was announced that Rick had signed on to reprise his role as Wayne Selinsky in Shrunk, a new sequel to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. After nearly 23 years away from live-action films, Rick was returning for a franchise that had meant so much to his career. However, as of 2025, the project remains on hold. Disney hasn't moved forward with production, and it's unclear if Shrunk will ever actually happen. Rick has remained quiet about it, neither pushing for the film nor distancing himself from it. More recently, in 2025, Mel Brooks announced a Spaceballs sequel with Rick set to reprise his role as Dark Helmet. According to director Josh Greenbaum, Mel Brooks, now 98 years old, has been actively working on the project, and Rick is on board. Whether this actually comes to fruition remains to be seen, but the announcement generated significant excitement from fans who grew up quoting the original. Rick is now 72 years old, having turned 72 in April 2025. His kids are grown adults now. The reasons he left Hollywood, being a present parent, avoiding the grind of promotional tours, escaping creative restrictions, no longer apply in the same way. If he chooses to work again, it will be entirely on his own terms. The legacy. Rick Moranis occupies a unique place in pop culture. For about a decade, he was one of the most reliable comic actors in Hollywood, appearing in hit after hit, creating memorable characters that still resonate today. Louis Tully, Seymour Krelborn, Dark Helmet, Wayne Selinsky, Bob McKenzie. These weren't just roles, they were parts of the cultural landscape of the 80s and 90s. What makes Rick even more remarkable is how he left. In an industry that often chews people up and spits them out, where careers fade due to scandal or irrelevance, Rick walked away on his own terms, for the most selfless reason imaginable: to be a good father. He didn't trash Hollywood. He didn't write tell-all books or give bitter interviews. He just quietly stepped back, raised his children, and lived his life. When people asked if he missed it, he gave honest answers that usually amounted to "not really." In a 2015 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Rick talked about how he approached potential projects. "I'm picky," he said. "I turned down a lot of stuff. I made choices based on the scripts." Even in semi-retirement, he maintained standards. The shows and movies he made have remained relevant. Ghostbusters still plays on television and streaming services. Spaceballs is quoted endlessly. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids introduced multiple generations to Rick's work. Kids who grew up watching him in the 80s now show those same films to their own children. And through it all, Rick stayed grounded. No reality shows, no desperate comeback attempts, no tell-all interviews. He went to baseball games with his kids. He took walks in New York. He lived the life he chose, which turned out to be far more valuable than any Hollywood career.
We do a thing, because I'm the record company, we do shipping and fondling too, so.
Nice.
What really happened? So what really happened to Rick Moranis? The answer is both simpler and more profound than most celebrity disappearances. He experienced a devastating personal loss. He reevaluated his priorities. He chose his children over his career. And he discovered that walking away from fame and fortune didn't diminish his life, it enhanced it. There's no scandal, no mysterious illness, no falling out with Hollywood power players. Rick Moranis left because being present for his children mattered more than being present on movie screens. It's a decision that seems almost incomprehensible in today's celebrity-obsessed culture, where every moment of fame is monetized and extended as long as possible. Rick proved that you can walk away from success and be happy, that you can be famous and then choose not to be, that being a good parent is more important than being a movie star. His legacy isn't just the films he made, though those will endure. His legacy is also the example he set. In an industry built on ego and ambition, Rick Moranis showed that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply go home and be with your family. Maybe he'll make another movie. Maybe Shrunk will happen, or the Spaceballs sequel will go into production. Maybe not. Either way, Rick Moranis has nothing to prove to anyone. He made his choice, raised his kids, and lived his life according to his own values. And every parent who's ever faced the same impossible choice between career ambitions and family responsibilities understands exactly what happened to Rick Moranis. He did what any good parent would want to do, but what few people in his position have the courage to actually do. He chose what mattered. Rick Moranis' story isn't about what Hollywood did to him, or what fame took from him, or how the industry changed. It's about a man who faced an unimaginable loss, made a difficult choice, and never looked back with regret. The movies he made still make us laugh, the characters he created still resonate, and the decision he made still inspires respect. If you enjoyed learning about Rick Moranis and his remarkable journey, Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the people who shaped the entertainment we grew up with. And if you have memories of watching Rick's films or thoughts on his decision to step away from Hollywood, share them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.